Oh, we don't have the Romanticism sheets either, do I? Good day to do Romanticism when you can't tell dream from reality. Okay, so I also have to get you the Romanticism sheets on the break. And we'll be contrasting that with realism next. We looked at neoclassical metaphysical last, and now we're really moving up about another century or two to the end of the 1700s and all through the 1800s, and really maybe to some extent even up to present day. Romanticism stays around for a long time. First of all, it's a revolt against the unemotionality of reason, science, authority, tradition, order, and discipline. All the things that had dominated the late 1600s and the early 1700s. Rationalism comes in, says the world makes sense, basically follows Aristotle, says that the real world, the physical world is the real world. There's a lot we can know and understand about the real world. In fact, that we can control the real world. That leads to the rise of science. Industrialism grows up. Standard of living does go up. Things get easier for people materially. But after that's been around for about 100 years, there are all kinds of side effects. For example, it's true that a lot more people have a lot more money than they had before. But now they're working in factories. To work in factories, they have to move into the cities. You move into the cities weren't built to hold that many people. So people are all crammed and crowded together. And although they've got better jobs than they had before, and they're making a little bit more money, they're actually living worse because there's so many of them crowded into such a small area. Capitalism throws people away once it uses them up. So you go to the factories and you start working young and healthy, and then you start to get old, and when you get old, they fire you. And there's no Social Security, and there's no unemployment. You're just out of work. And if you can't find something to do, you starve. So even though for a while people may be doing better, in the long run they're doing worse again. Also from living in the cities, the conditions are crowded. You don't have the fresh air. You could go out at noontime in London and not be able to see the sun because there was so much smoke from the factories and things. So again, the living conditions aren't nearly as good. Also, when people lived out on the farm and they worked more in agriculture, they at least had fresh air. They may not have had an awful lot of it, but they had fresh fruits and vegetables. Now, everything you get, from the meat to the food to the fruit to even the bread, is 2-3 days old by the time it comes in. Maybe longer than that. So the food isn't as good as it was. When you lived in a village, 50 people, maybe 100 people used the same well. You move to the city, 5,000 people use that well. If somebody throws a dead cat down it, everybody gets sick. What public water there is easily contaminated. There's not much in the way of waste removal. The cities are awful places to live, and more people live there. And all this is because of rationalism and the Industrial Revolution and what everybody thought was a great new age, because all of a sudden there's more jobs and everybody's making more money. And it turns out in the long run that it really isn't. Plus, people don't have anything that they can really take pride in. Before the factory system, people made, if you were a shoemaker, you made the whole shoe. Now, you might only poke little holes in a piece of leather that eventually will get made into the side of the shoe. There's not much you can say about that. You can't say, I made those are pretty good, they're going to last you a long time. All you can say is, maybe I punched those holes where your shoelaces are, maybe I didn't. So there's nothing about, life begins to get meaningless the longer rationalism and the Industrial Revolution stays in power. And Romanticism is a reaction to all that. It says that Aristotle's wrong, that the physical world is not the real and only world. It's not even the important world. To the Romantics, they agree with Plato. The world is basically an illusion. Remember, Plato said that the world was a reflection of a cosmic reality, where he said there were ideal forms. Well, to the Romantics, that cosmic reality is based on a conflict between good and evil. Now, it's not couched in religious terms necessarily, but they saw it's not exactly like the Middle Ages. Remember, the Middle Ages saw the world this way too. God and Satan were at war. Everything in this world had to do with that. There was a devil on your right hand, and an angel on your right hand, and a devil on your left hand. And everything that happened to you had something to do with one of them or the other. The religious emphasis is far less with Romanticism, but they do still see the world in terms of good and evil. And there's a cosmic battle between good and evil. That spiritual world permeates the physical world, so that everything in this world has something to do with that cosmic battle between good and evil. And like, to some extent, like the Middle Ages, physical things have supernatural properties to them. There can be evil places. If enough evil occurs in a place, somehow the place becomes tainted and becomes evil in itself. An object could be cursed. Say you had a knife that was used in a dozen murders. No romantic would see that as being the same as any other knife. A rationalist, if you gave him that knife and 5 knives that looked like it, would say they have different qualities. Maybe there are little nicks in one that aren't in the other, and they may differ in that way, but they don't differ in any significant way. But if you gave a romantic, you're sitting down at dinner in a restaurant, and you're about to cut your steak, and they tell you that the knife that you're using was used to cut the throat of a previous patron. How many of you would be upset about that?
I would.
If you would, then you're a romantic. Romantic believes that. Now, the rationalist would say, well, did you wash it since then? Oh, okay, no problem. Let me have the knife. It's nice and sharp. It'll work fine.
It cut for a person, it can cut my meat.
Yes, it's worked before. This is a good knife. It's already been tested. I'm happy with this knife. This is fine. But to a romantic, that evil deed somehow adheres to that knife. Even though the blood's been washed off, somehow some part of that action is still inherent in the object. And when they look at the world, that's the way they see everything. Stuff like, if you believe in luck, then you're a romantic. What does the rationalist believe in instead of luck?
Chance.
Hard work.
Chance. And, well, hard work, yeah, if you want good things to happen to you, you have to work for them. But they also believe in chance, that the world is random, nobody's running it. We'll see this again when we come to existentialism, which won't be all that long from now, and to some extent in terms of realism. The world is basically random. When things happen by chance, there's no orderly sequence to them. A certain number of good things and a certain number of bad things will happen to everybody in their lifetime. Probably about the same number of both. That's the rationalist point of view. Is that the way, how many of you think that's the way life works? Pretty much by accident, you'll have some good things happen to you, and you'll have some bad things, and the good and bad things will even out. Okay, that's rationalism. You'll probably side with the rationalists, and you'll like the realists when we get to them. The romantics have to believe that more good things happen than bad. Because this cosmic battle between good and evil, who do the romantics think is going to win?
Hero.
The hero is going to win. Good is going to win. Good is going to triumph over evil. In a universe where good is going to triumph over evil, it ought to triumph over evil most of the time. Which means the good guys ought to win almost all the time. You can see why the rationalists thought the romantics were nuts. If you look around you, are the good guys winning?
Not really.
I don't think so. And if you go and look at the people who have the most, they're not the best human beings. They're generally the best at making money. And a lot of the time their money comes out of things which are basically immoral, or at the minimum, unethical. The more you lie and cheat in this world, the better you seem to do. Well, that's contradictory to everything the Romantics believe. The Romantics believe that good's going to triumph. Things aren't random. More good things will happen to you than bad. When we get to the naturalist, the Romantics think more good things happen than bad. The realists and the rationalists believe that it's about even, because it's random. Some people may have a lot more bad things than good, because when you scatter things out, sometimes they are clumps. Like if you have black marbles and white marbles, and we threw them on the floor, they wouldn't disperse evenly, so there were an even number of black and white marbles everywhere. There'd be a bunch of black marbles here, and then next to them there might be a clump of white, and then there'd be some mixed, and then there'd be clumps of white and clumps of black. Well, if you happen to be passing through one of those clumps of black marbles, you're going to hit a lot of black marbles. And if you happen to be going through that area where they're fairly mixed, you will come up with a fairly even number. But you shouldn't be coming up with a pretty even number, because things are random. So the realists think that things are largely random, and you'll come up with some good and you'll come up with some bad. And the naturalists, who we're going to get to after the realists, believe that you're going to come up with bad things almost all the time. Because not only is the world may be random, but there are so many forces at work in the world that have no regard for human beings whatsoever, that these large-scale forces are basically going to act to your detriment. The only way the world can act to your benefit is if there's some sort of benevolent being, or at least a benevolent tendency, running through the events of the world. And that's what the Romantics think there is. They think good is winning, and good is ultimately going to win. And good, and that battle between good and evil is reflected in everything you do. And the only thing that's really important about your life is whether what you do is right or wrong. Not whether what you do makes you a lot of money, not whether what you do makes you a lot more comfortable, not even whether what you do makes you loved or hated, but whether what you do is right or wrong. And everything has to do with that. The world, to the Romantic, is both tragic and heroic. There are struggles in which evil seems to win. Ultimately good is going to win. But the Romantics, even though it's not tied to a specific religion, tend to believe that there is an afterlife, and that in the afterlife, evil is punished and good is rewarded. And so when good seems to lose here, it doesn't necessarily lose overall. That to a Romantic, the most heroic thing you can do is to sacrifice your life for somebody else. Now, to a realist, you sacrifice your life, what happens to you?
Die.
You die. That's it. You had your shot and you threw it away for somebody else, maybe even for a total stranger. That's downright stupid as far as the realists are concerned. To the Romantics, though, what happens to you?
You go to the afterlife.
You go to the afterlife where you get rewarded for that selfless act. Since that's the highest of the selfless acts, you get rewarded accordingly. So Romantics, when you read a Romantic story, the hero may die in the end, sacrificing himself for other people. But there's an implication that that's eventually going to get paid off. That in the afterlife, that person will be doing well. Ultimately, everybody has the chance to be heroic. All you have to do is to do what's right. Now, doing what's right isn't as easy as it sounds. Sometimes there are tough choices to be made. A lot of times there are gray areas between what's right and wrong. For example, even for the romantic, and the romantic has this problem. Killing people, should it be good or bad?
Bad.
Should be bad, and that's what evil people do. They kill other people. But what happens if a madman comes in here and starts to shoot the place up, and you're armed? What should you do? You have to shoot him if that's the only way to stop him, and you might try to just wing him and shoot the gun out of his hand. But that's not likely to happen. It happens in all the romantic movies. I mean, and especially in previous, say up to about this, in the 50s, and all those black and white movies, all those cowboy movies, people were always shooting the gun out of somebody's hand. You know how hard that is?
Extremely.
Yeah, it's almost impossible. And it always hit the gun. It never blew their fingers off. Because it was ideal. Ideal, of course, is part of being romantic. There are times when you may have to kill somebody to save somebody else. The romantic doesn't like to deal with things like that. They like things as pretty black and white. There's just good and there's just bad. The fact is you have to make choices. Well, how do you know what to do? The romantic says, it's not as hard as it seems. First of all, everybody comes into the world born good. Well, if everybody comes into the world born good, how do we get so bad? How is it that we do so many terrible things? The world corrupts us. Now, the romantic says we're born good, and not only are we born good, but we're born with a built-in moral compass. Moral compass that always points towards the good. And that compass is your heart, your emotions. For the romantic, it's this simple. Good feels good, and evil feels bad. Even when you just think about it, it feels bad. And so you know what to do, because when you think about the alternatives, one will make you feel good, and the other one will make you feel bad. It hasn't got anything to do with the thank yous you'll get, or the threats that you'll get based on what you do. It has to do with whether the thing is naturally good or naturally bad. And everybody's got this built-in moral compass. All you have to do is follow your heart. Good feels good. Well, that being the case, everybody's got a moral compass. Everybody's here to do good. It's easy to know what good is. How do we do bad so often?
Somebody puts a magnet to it.
That's actually a good metaphor. Somebody puts a magnet to our moral compass. Remember that relationship between the intellect and the emotions? What drives down the emotions? The intellect going up. It's the intellect that corrupts our moral compass. We learn from society to do the wrong thing. We learn not to follow our heart. Education is largely a process of teaching people to use their intellects rather than their intuition, rather than their emotions. The intellect corrupts us. In other words, you're walking down the street, you see somebody who really looks like they're down on their luck, and they really look pretty hungry. What's your natural impulse? Give them some money. Give them some food. Help them out. But your intellect intervenes. Says, well, wait a minute. They weren't born in that condition. They got themselves there. I give that guy the money. He's probably going to spend it on a bottle of Muscatel anyway. He's going to go get drunk in an alley. Or he's going to go get some drugs and shoot up. Or he's there because he kept getting fired from jobs because he was too lazy to work. He brought that on himself. It's not my problem. Society's supposed to take care of that guy. And you walk on by. You don't listen to your heart. Because your intellect gives you a whole lot of reason for not listening to it. The intellect allows us to do an enormous number of downright evil things because we can make up good excuses for them. There are good reasons for what we do. It's never your fault. When you do something that's wrong and that you feel a little bit ashamed of, the romantic would say, Anytime you do something wrong, you're going to feel ashamed. You're going to feel bad about it. Unless you lose touch with your emotions. And of course, your intellect, the more you employ your intellect, the less you can feel. And education keeps telling you to use your intellect. In fact, they won't let you out of kindergarten, and they won't let you learn how to read, and they won't let you go on in the process of making your intellect dominant over your emotions until you can control your emotions. If you cry every day when you come to school, if you laugh out loud in the middle of class, if you wander around and look out the window, do they promote you?
No.
No. They say you're not mature enough to go on to first grade. You have to get your emotions under control before you can do that. And the same thing through all of the grades. If you get a story to read in literature, and instead of explaining it, you start to cry, what will they do? Say that's wonderful, you responded to what exactly the writer wanted you to do? No, they'll tell you can't explain it. There's something wrong with you. You have to, obviously you don't have your emotions under control. The romantic goes to see a sad movie, what do? They cry. The rationalist, the realist goes to see a sad movie. If it gets sad, and if they start to feel sad, what do they say to themselves?
It's just a movie.
It's only a movie. Why are you responding to this thing? It's not real. And when it comes to their real life, they do the same thing. Whenever they start to respond emotionally, they impose their intellect, and they say, you're getting carried away here. You should think about things. You shouldn't feel things. So the romantic says it's this use of the intellect that drives down our ability to feel. And that drives down people's ability to do right and wrong. To the romantic, if we all followed our hearts, everything would come out fine. Everybody would take care of everybody else. When I had more than I needed and you had less, I'd give you some of mine. It's all that stuff they teach you maybe even before kindergarten. But of course, one of their constructs, if you look down at number 8, is the concept of the noble savage. And the noble savage comes from Rousseau. And what Rousseau says is the noble savage is also called natural man. Man uncorrupted by society. People who follow their heart. I'm sorry, you don't have it. That's right, I have to get this for you at the break. In any case, natural man, the noble savage. It's the person uncorrupted by the intellect. And usually it's in, the Romantics felt that you could see this most strongly in what were called uncivilized cultures. Ones that didn't have a written literature. Ones that didn't build cities. Ones that hadn't developed science yet. It was why the West went out and colonized the rest of the world. That's the intellect doing that. To the Romantics, all of that were taking people who were naturally good and corrupting them. So that when you read somebody like Herman Melville, anybody know who, you've heard of Herman Melville? Moby Dick? Who are his noble savages? The people in Polynesia, Hawaii and Tahiti and all the islands in the Southwest Pacific. Almost no crime among them. No guilt. No theft. You could basically pull a living without very much work out of the ocean and off the breadfruit trees. There was no real reason to steal. And so the people that the Romantics believed lived there were all good and kind and nice. They didn't have any hang-ups about sex. They didn't have any hang-ups about love. They didn't impose the intellect. They followed their hearts. Because they followed their hearts, they lived naturally and well. A lot of the Romantics write about, for example, the American Indians, looked at the same way as being inherently noble inherently good, because they aren't corrupted by Western society, by the society of the intellect. The best example of the noble savage you see every day. They live entirely in their emotions. You can make them laugh, you can make them cry the next minute. They're naturally kind and nice. They don't have any reason for doing what they do other than it feels good. When you ask them to explain their behavior, they can't. Who are they? They jump up and down on the bed, and you say to them, why are you jumping on the bed? Children. I don't know. But why are they jumping up and down on the bed? Do they have some purpose to it? Are they trying to knock the plaster off the ceiling below them? Are they trying to ruin the bed springs? No, they're doing it. It makes them happy. They're following their hearts. It feels good. If it feels good, you should do it. Now, the Romantics believed that children were nice, that they were kind, that they automatically and spontaneously shared with one another, that if you hurt one of them, the other ones would try to stop you. And if they couldn't stop you, they would at least try to commiserate with the one who had been hurt and would try to cheer them up in some way. The rationalists and the realists believed that the Romantics had never seen a live child, and that's why they had so many misconceptions about them. They said children are nasty, vicious little beasts who have to be taught the rules and generally have to be beaten into shape. Left to their own devices, it would turn into Lord of the Flies. It would be a Survivor with no rules. Everybody would just kill everybody else if we let children go and didn't discipline them and civilize them and make them use their intellect.
Right.
The Romantics said children aren't naturally nasty. If your children are naturally mean, it's because you've taught them meanness. Well, nobody sits their kid down and says, look, kid, the world's tough. You've got to be as nasty as you possibly can. If you see a chance to hurt somebody, take it. Nobody tells their kid that. Well, how do kids learn to be nasty then?
Their experience.
Through their experience. Other people are nasty to them. Adults are nasty to them. Adults are nasty to one another. Say, be kind and nice to people. And then when somebody cuts you off in the parkway, you stick your head out of the window and threaten to pull out their liver. Well, you can tell your kid all you want, be nice to people, but you've already just taught them something that all your words it's going to make all of your words useless. For example, everybody tells their kid to share. It's nice to share your stuff. But if your child comes home without their bicycle, and you say, where is it? And they say, I met a kid who didn't have a bicycle and never rode one. And I let him ride mine and it made him so happy, I gave it to him. Would you say to him, that's a wonderful thing?
Probably not.
No, most parents would say, what did this kid look like? What was he wearing? Where did you give him the bike? What direction was he going in? Let's go get your bike back. So the next time you say to them, share, 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 what do they know? They know that you're lying. Why hasn't the war on drugs worked? Because it's so absolutely hypocritical. The people who are telling you to do it are put down their cigarette and our martini and say, don't take drugs. One of the things that children have is a real good sense of hypocrisy. If you want to get rid of drugs, you've got to get rid of all the drugs. If some of them are bad because they have effects on the way your mind works, then all of them are bad. You have to say, get rid of all of them. And of course, the hypocrisy, that idea that you can tell people things all you want, they follow your actions. And the dominant society loves alcohol. You see it in every movie. So you can't, it's the same, it's exactly what the Romantics would say. You followed your heart. Well, actually, would the Romantics be against drugs?
Probably, most likely, yes.
Only where they hurt people. In other words, you get addicted to a drug and you're selling yourself on the street and you're stealing from your friends, then the Romantics say drugs are terrible. But generally they wouldn't say they were bad at all. One of the reasons why realists and rationalists think drugs are awful is because what do drugs normally affect most? Your intellect or your emotions?
Intellect.
Your intellect. It decreases your intellect. To the rationalist, that's the worst possible thing that can happen. Remember, to the rationalist, to the realist, just as it was to the neoclassicists and the classicists, the intellect, it reigns supreme. It's what separates us from the animals. To voluntarily disable your intellect is a terrible thing to anybody who believes in the intellect. But what do the Romantics think of the intellect?
That it should be going down.
That it should be going down. It's the intellect that's the problem. Anything that gets rid of your intellect is a good thing. Anything that puts you back in touch with your emotions is a good thing. So the Romantics generally used a lot of drugs. Alcohol, of course, included. And they used them because they paralyzed the intellect. Thinking was bad. Feeling was good. It's almost like the Middle Ages. So that anything that increased, up to a point, anything that increased your emotions was a good thing. So in other words, you take drugs, makes you feel happy, romantic, would have to say that's fine. You're happy, everybody around you likes you a lot better, they're happy, that's good. What happens when it starts to make everybody around you sad?
That's bad.
Now it's bad. There are good and bad emotions. And you should know that. In other words, the Romantic would say you don't have to worry about drugs becoming a problem because they put you back in touch with your emotions. Your emotions put you back in touch with what's good. When you see your friends or your siblings or your parents looking heartbroken at what you're doing, how would that make you feel?
Bad.
Bad. So what would that tell you about drugs? You got to stop doing them. Or you got to stop doing them as much as you're doing them. To the Romantic, it would only be good as long as it felt good and it made everybody feel good. As soon as you start making other people feel bad, that's going to make you feel bad. Then obviously there's something wrong with it and you have to stop doing that. But as long as to the Romantic, as long as you're following your heart, you're going to be okay. In other words, nobody would go overboard on drugs because they would start to see how bad it made other people feel. And that would make them feel bad. Feeling bad is bad, so you stop doing that. In other words, everybody would only do things that made them happy and made everybody else happy. The Romantics, as you can see, are idealistic. They're like the followers of Plato. They believe in that ideal world. And in that ideal world, as long as you follow your heart, you're not going to do the wrong thing. The more in touch you are with your emotions, the more likely you are to do what's right. And your emotions, of course, are affected by the emotions of the people you love and the people that love you. They're even affected by the emotions of people you don't know. When you see somebody being made unhappy, well, how many of you feel good if you see somebody cry?
Depends on the person.
Depends on the person. Actually, there is a long list of people I'd like to see cry, come to think of it. But then I'm not really a romantic. Most romantics feel bad. If you came across somebody crying, most people will actually go up. If you say if you're standing in a parking lot crying, I'll bet you that you don't stand there for 20 minutes and nobody comes up and asks you what's wrong and offers to help. My guess is probably a number of people will do that if you stand out there for 20 minutes. All of them will be romantics. Except for the occasional rationalist or realist who thinks, are we in some sort of danger here? Let me find out why this person is crying, because maybe people are being shot in that building and I might not, maybe it shouldn't be a good idea to go in there. Let me get as much information as I can before I proceed. But most people will intervene because somebody else feels bad and that makes them feel bad. And the Romantics think this is what would happen all the time. Whenever you feel bad, it would be obvious to other Romantics. It would make them unhappy. They'll say to you, what is your problem? And they'll help you try and solve it. They'll make it right for you. That's what everybody's job in the world is, to make it right. Not just to make it right for yourself, but to make it right for everybody. To the Romantic, if we all followed our hearts, we would live in this blissful, idyllic world where nobody lets anybody else be sad, where everybody helps everybody else out, where everybody shares their stuff spontaneously, where nobody intentionally hurts anybody else, and where they unintentionally hurt somebody else, they try to make up for them. You make somebody sad, you have to try to make them happy again. That's what it's all about. That's what following your heart is all about. And the problem to the romantic is that we've gotten caught up in our intellects. And our intellects keep us from doing the right thing. They keep us from doing what's right. They even keep us from feeling what's right. And this cosmic battle between good and evil is being lost at the moment. The more the intellect dominates a culture, the more evil it is. The more evil it is because the more selfish it is, because the less it has any touch with its feelings. Now, everybody's life is both heroic and tragic. Everybody is the hero, and in some cases the villain, of their own life. You're all the stars of your own soap opera. Well, what do soap operas aim at? The intellect or the emotions?
Emotions.
The emotions, sensations. So you get to be the star of your emotional life, and you really determine how things are going to come out. And you have an effect on other people. Now, things are tragic because we don't always follow our heart. We often do things that harm other people. When we recognize that, it makes us feel bad, and that makes life tragic because nobody goes through this world without making mistakes. Nobody goes through this world without hurting other people. To the romantics, that's tragic. It's the way of things. We struggle to hurt as few other people as we can, but we're not always going to succeed. We're going to fail, and that's tragic. It's also tragic because we die. Now, the romantic believes there's a life after this of some sort in which good gets rewarded and evil gets punished. But mostly they don't think that you get another shot at this life. This is the only time you're going to have the current passing moment. And so you want to get every bit out of it that you can. This is as young as you're going to get. Right now, this instant. In fact, you're now older than when I just said that. Life is passing by. You're not going to get a second chance at it. Anything you put off, you may not get to do. You can't leave all the good stuff for when you're old, and you'll fix it all up then, because you may not get old. And if you do, you may still be putting it off. You may die before you get to do all of that good stuff and all of those amends that you intended to make, and all the good stuff you intended to do spontaneously, but you put off because it wasn't convenient. One of the tragic things about life to the romantic is that nobody pays attention to it. You're probably feeling as good right now as you're ever going to feel. Almost all of you are in the prime of your life. This is it's sad but true. This is as good as it gets. Whatever it is for you right now, that's about as good as it's going to get. I mean, there will be less tragic things happening to you later in your life, maybe, and they won't hurt you nearly as much as they do now. But this is about you. Your capacity for joy is probably as great now as it's ever going to be.
I'm in trouble.
Well, not. There are lives, and the romantic wouldn't feel this was too bad to have a life where you were sad all the time, because the truth is, the romantics like the good cry almost as much as they like the good laugh. So a melancholy life for a romantic isn't all that bad. The poets were always supposed to be suffering. They were suffering from lost love. They were suffering because they were so sensitive to everybody else's problems that the condition of humanity put them in constant pain. So if you're a writer or you're a poet, That's really a good thing that you're sad as far as the romantics are concerned. It shows what refined qualities you have. That the artist is somebody who's more more sensitive than most people. That's what makes them an artist. And so they suffer more. That's the price of having those sensibilities. There's a lot of stuff in life that's sad. The more sensitive you are, the sadder it's going to be. Now the romantic doesn't say, though, well, all right, your life is sad, you have this real sensitivity. Anne Sexton said, I have perfect pitch for pain. What's perfect pitch? It's when you can hear, somebody plays a note, you know exactly what the note is. Well, so it's like Anne Bradstreet said, Anne Sexton said, no matter what happens to me during my day, the bad stuff really jumps out at me. The good stuff I miss a lot, but the bad stuff I really home in on. Well, that's not a bad characteristic for a writer to have. But let's say you're one of those people who has enormously developed sensitivity, what the romantics would call sensibility. When you look around, you see sadness everywhere. Are you entitled to commit suicide? No, absolutely not. Life is supposed to be a struggle to the romantics. Everybody has an opportunity to be a hero. To continue to live in a sad world. Doing as much as you can to make it a better place. But knowing that ultimately you can't succeed. You can't make the world right. No matter how hard you work at it. That doesn't give you the license to bail out and quit. To the romantic, you're also required to be a hero. The romantics probably had the same definition of hero as the Vikings. To the Vikings, when you died, if you were a hero, if you were brave, first of all, you had to die in battle. If you died, you went on to Valhalla, the home of the gods, where you feasted for 1,000 years. And then you got in a final battle with the ice giants, with evil, and evil wins. But you still fight heroically in that. Now you can't get to Valhalla unless you die fighting in a hopelessly lost cause. If you're fighting to preserve your life, if you still got some chance of winning, if you still got some chance of getting out of there alive, that's not heroism, that's just survival. But if everything is lost and you continue to fight anyway, that's heroic. Well, to the romantic, that's what life is like. Yes, you can't make the world perfect. Maybe you can't even make it that much better. But to be the hero, you have to try. You can't give up. You can't quit. Yes, life is enormously painful to you. Well, who's the greater hero? Achilles that doesn't feel any of his wounds? Or Hector that feels all of his wounds and keeps fighting? Who's the bigger hero? Hector is. The real hero suffers. He suffers trying to put more good into the world. That's what being a hero is. So, yeah, if your life is sad, you still can't commit suicide. The romantic would feel bad for you if you did. They would feel sad that you gave up. But they wouldn't say that was a good thing. A romantic would never say that. To a romantic, life is supposed to be a struggle, and every struggle is an opportunity for heroism. It's an opportunity not to quit. Life is tough, and the tougher it gets, the stronger you have to be. That's what the hero does. The hero doesn't fold. The hero continues to struggle, no matter how difficult it becomes for them. And everybody gets an opportunity to be a hero in their life in all kinds of different ways. Anytime you add good to the world, you're being a hero. Anytime you do something nice for somebody, that's heroic. In fact, half the time, if you do something nice for somebody, will everybody else come up and pat you on the back?
Probably.
No. Most of them will come up and say, what an idiot you are. Don't you realize that when you ran out for that dog that was too dumb to get out of traffic, you could have gotten run over? You could have died doing that. What an idiot you are. And they'll laugh at you. Half the time when we do nice things, we don't tell anybody about them, because they think we were foolish to do it. Would the romantic think that's good? You're a hero without any praise.
Yes.
Yeah. In fact, you don't need any praise. You don't need any thank yous. For the romantic, when you do something good, it feels good. Doing the right thing is its own reward. And I guess conversely, doing the wrong thing really doesn't need any punishment. Why?
Because nobody knows you did it.
Well, that's the rationalist view of things. You got away with it, you're entitled. The romantic's view of it is you do something wrong, you feel bad. The worse it is, the worse you feel. Punishment doesn't really help you out with that much. The reason why, well, why is it that people can do terrible things like murder somebody and walk away from it and not feel bad about it?
Because they're like me.
They probably, because they use their intellect. They say, well, he really deserved it. There are all kind of people on death row who will tell you, don't feel bad about what they did at all. They say, I never killed anybody who didn't have it coming. They pulled into the parking space ahead of me. Don't you have the impulse to kill people who do that? But you can't, because if you did that, the romantic would say, you'd look at that person, you realize you had ended a life. That even though they were a terrible person, they weren't always terrible. Nobody's a villain all the time. Even the people who run insurance companies have families, have pets that love them, have somebody who cares about them. No matter what despicable decisions they make about your health care, nevertheless, there's some, if you saw them at a certain moment in time, it's almost impossible to tell the heroes from the villains. If you saw Adolf Hitler playing with his dogs, and that's all you knew about him, you just got that one glimpse of him playing with his dogs, what would you think?
Nice guy.
You would think he was a nice guy. The dogs are having fun. The dogs love him. He loves animals. Of course, most serial killers like animals, by the way. So all you saw was them being nice to animals. You would think they were a nice person. They really didn't deserve that. So the romantic would say that when you do something terrible like that, one, you can do it because you put your intellect in charge and keep yourself from seeing what it is you've actually done. And that allows you not to feel it. That the real punishment for any crime to a romantic would be making the criminal feel what they've done to their victim. And that once they did that, once you made them really experience the misery they had caused in the world, you wouldn't have to punish them. They would carry their punishment with them everywhere they went. So everybody gets a chance to be the villain too. It's not a good thing to be a villain to the romantics, but everybody is. That's again the tragic part. And the heroic part is when you struggle to do the right thing. Is the right thing going to be without cost to you?
No.
No. Most of the time, doing the right thing hurts. There's some pain involved in doing the right thing. And in fact, to the romantic, the more you have to give up to do what's right, the more heroic that is. Heroes aren't just people who get medals. They're not always people who put their life in danger. To the romantic, everybody's life has these opportunities. If you go to work every day at a job you hate so that you can put a roof over the head of somebody you love, what would the romantic say about that?
That was a good thing.
That was a good thing. That's a heroic thing. That it's more heroic, in fact, to give up your life one day, 1 hour, 1 minute at a time than it is to throw it away all at once. In other words, the heroes who, let's say, somebody who gives up their true love, person that they don't get married so that they can take care of an elderly parent. What would the Romantics say about that?
It's great.
That's great. That's about as heroic as you can get. Love is the best thing that you can get in the world to the Romantic. It's the best thing you can give. You gave up all of that pleasure, all that sensation, all those good emotions in order to do the right thing. And you didn't do it once. You did it every day. You kept coming back and doing the right thing over and over again. To the Romantic, that's the true hero. That's why everybody's life, and it's why the Romantics focus on often such ordinary, mundane things as people going to work, or people doing their job, or families, or relationships. Because to the Romantic, those are all triumphs. Those are all heroic events. They're all places where something right was done. So they focus on those. The idea, again, is to do the right thing. And to be a hero, you sacrifice. And the more sacrifices you make for other people, the more heroic you are. And actually, the more you do, Romantic would argue that the more you do for other people, the better you feel. Nobody has to know you did those things. You don't have to get your picture in the paper for being a charitable person. All you have to do is feel in your heart that what you did was right. And that will sustain you. That will be its own reward. And everybody gets opportunities every day to be a hero. That heroism is generally overlooked by the rationalist and the realist, by the Aristotelian, because they say, well, yeah, you made somebody happy today, but so what? Compared to the vast ocean of misery in the world, the little tiny good that you did is absolutely insignificant. Will make no change in the world at all, will make no difference in the world at all. But the Romantic says, yeah, but you did what you could. Not everybody has the capacity to do great things. Not everybody has the opportunity to do great things. But everybody has the opportunity to do good things. And that to the extent that you do those good things, you're just as heroic as the people who do things that change societies, that change empires. In fact, most of the people who do the things that matter in the world and make huge changes often cause as much misery in the world as they cause pleasure. On the other hand, everybody gets to struggle every day. Every day that you don't give up. And this will actually come back in existentialism. That's the surprising thing. In existentialism, when we get to it, there's no supreme being, there's no meaning to the universe at all, everything is completely random. There's no good, there's no evil. You decide what it is. Even to the existentialist, the fact that you don't cut your throat today was an act of heroism. The tougher your life is, every time you decide to live it one more minute, to try one more day of it, that's heroic. And you ought to be proud of that. That's a good thing. On the other hand, giving up's a bad thing. Giving up is surrendering to evil. You know so much this is like the Middle Ages? The hero can't take a backward step from evil. You always have to do the good. Everything in the world is symbolic. Everything stands for good or evil one way or another. And you have to make choices every day. And the choices you make are either good or evil. And that makes you either a hero or a villain. If you've done villainous things all the time, can you make up for that? Absolutely. The Romantic likes nothing better than somebody who's been doing the wrong thing all along, recognizing that it's the wrong thing, and doing the right thing. You can redefine your life at any moment in it simply by looking at all the things that you let yourself slide on that you gave yourself excuses for, and recognizing the horror of the misery you created in the world, and feeling bad about it. Is that enough?
Sometimes.
Yeah, for a romantic, sometimes that's all you can do. Sometimes the people you've wronged have disappeared. You can't find them to make it right.
Or you killed them.
Or you killed them. Or they died. And maybe they died because of what you did, but you can't get them back, and you can't fix it. So maybe all you can do is feel bad about it. And the romantic would say, that's okay. The romantic isn't necessarily down on what we consider the negative emotions. It depends what causes them. And it depends what you do about them. Well, let's say that all the people that you hurt in this world are all now beyond your power to make amends to. What would the romantic say you have to do?
Forgive yourself.
One, you have to forgive yourself, and you have to do good. Well, who do you have to do good to? Everybody from now on. Everybody from this moment on. From whatever moment you say, I've been a villain all this time, now I'm going to be a hero. So everybody you meet, you got to go out of your way. No matter what the sacrifice is, you got to make it because you owe it. This is a romantic idea. Paying it forward. Somebody helps you out. Often in life, people who are older than yourself and who have made mistakes and who know what the mistakes are will give you advice and help you out. Can you pay them back? No, usually they pretty well succeeded in life and they're pretty much beyond your ability to do anything good for. So who do you have to help?
People.
The next person you come in contact with. You got to be the person who was old and gave you some useful advice. You can't help, but when you start to get old and there is useful advice you can give, and you've got to give it. You've got to go out of your way and make the sacrifice. In other words, for the romantics, everybody has to mentor the next generation. You have to give them the... Now, it doesn't necessarily mean... When you give people good advice, will they thank you for it? Really? I don't know. I don't remember anybody who ever took my advice. Maybe it's because I don't have any. If they take your advice, usually they will. But let's say that generally when you're young, you make a lot of mistakes. It's not that you don't make mistakes when you're older. You don't have as many opportunities to make mistakes when you're older. And you've made so many mistakes that you don't make them again just because you're familiar with them. But let's say you're coming to somebody who's destroying everybody around them with whatever it is they're doing, but they're having a good time. And you point out to them that they're making everybody who knows them miserable. Are they going to thank you for that? No. Should you tell them anyway? If you're a romantic, you have to. Maybe they're not going to listen to you, and maybe they're not going to change their life, and maybe everybody isn't going to end up happy ever after. In fact, maybe they'll shoot you for interfering. But what does the romantic say? Do you have to take the chance?
Yes.
Absolutely. You have to take the chance, and you have to give your advice, even if they not only don't thank you for it, but threaten your life if you ever give them any advice again. Because a lot of times, people don't want help at the moment. Eventually they may. But you have to offer it anyway. The romantic would say, yeah, maybe 9 times out of 10, when you tell people, look, here's where your life is screwed up, which should be obvious to you, they won't thank you for that. And they won't change it in any way. And you basically wasted your time, put yourself in danger, and you haven't changed anything. But one time in 1,000, maybe even one time in 100, your intervention will make a difference. And the person will change their life. And they will end up happier. And they will end up making other people happy. So yeah, you've got to take 999 losses in order to have one victory. Let's take a break at the 3 o'clock, and I'll go upstairs and get these sheets I should have brought down. Okay, we're back to Romanticism again. One of the problems with, let's see what I missed on that one. Everything's good and evil. Everybody is a unique version of the good. There's the good in general, but every one of us is one of a kind. Again, similarity to the Middle Ages. Everybody is one of a kind, and so everybody is their own version of the good. And what you're required to do is to live out your version of the good. Not everybody's heart is the same. And you have to follow your heart. You have to follow your heart to be who you are. You were made unique. You were made one of a kind for a reason. And you're a one-of-a-kind version of the good, and so you have to live out that version of the good. What happens if your version of the good comes in conflict with the law?
And that's bad. And
What do you do about it? Do you follow the law, or do you follow your heart?
that's on.
Follow your heart. You break the law. The law is not, the rationalist, the realist will tell you the law is what's important. It's what holds everybody, it's what holds society together, that everybody is following the same rules. But the romantic tells you there are bad laws. You can't do a bad thing just because people made a mistake and made it the law. Remember, it was once the law that women weren't equal to men. It was once the law that if you weren't white, you were property. Were those good laws? Should people have obeyed them? We can see now clearly that they shouldn't have. And so the romantic says when you come across the bad law, your heart tells you it's right, do it. The law doesn't mean anything compared to your heart. How many of you drive 55? Right, that's what I thought. Nobody drives
It depends
55.
on the limit.
What?
It depends on the limit.
Well, assuming the limit's 55. No, most people drive faster, and that's a bad law.
Depends if,
There are people who are unsafe at 30.
depends if there's a cop in the area or not.
That's rational. Yeah, that's definitely the rationalist approach to it, if you can get caught. But the romantic would say, it feels good to drive faster. Not everybody's following their heart. It's a bad law. Don't listen to the bad laws. Break the bad laws. You're responsible for living your version of the good. So that means you can't listen to the law. You can't listen to the school. You can't listen to the church. You can't listen to your parents. You can't listen to your friends. You have to listen to your heart, because their version of the good is different than yours. You've never been before. There's never been anybody like you before. You're one of a kind, ever, in the entire history of the world. There can't be any rules about how to be you. You're the only one who knows what those rules are. And how do you know what the rules for being you are? You follow your heart. You listen to your emotions. And you have to do that no matter what the situation is. And it may cost you to do that, but the romantic says that's still what you have to do. The world isn't a big machine. The world is a metaphor. It's a poetic comparison between the physical and the supernatural. The problem with Jean-Jacques Rousseau is that when you set up this cult of sensibility, when you say the emotions tell you what's good, the people with the most refined emotions should be able to tell good better than other people. That makes them the best people. So everybody wants to seem to have highly developed emotions. Everybody wants to seem to be very sensitive. And the problem with that is that you end up with a lot of phony people pretending to be a lot more sensitive than they are. Because while it's difficult to fake an intellectual response, if I tell you I know all about nuclear physics, and after a while I'm talking about electrons the size of basketballs, you know I don't know what I'm talking about. But if I cry, you have no idea whether I'm really emotionally moved or if I've just gotten good at that. Then we get there are people who make their living crying. And that's what actors and actresses do. They're not sad at the moment when they do that. And lots of people that you know can probably make themselves cry whenever they want. And we can't be sure what their emotional response is. So what that does, it allows people to fake a sensitivity that they really don't have. And a lot of people did that around Rousseau because they wanted to be thought well of. A romantic, a member of the cult of sensibility, finds a dead bird. What do?
Very.
They bury it, but they don't bury it the way a rationalist does. They don't just dig a hole. They don't throw it in a trash can. They have a little funeral for it. They cry over it. Oh, this poor bird, its beautiful song is missing from the world. Somewhere a mommy bird and baby birds are waiting for its return, and it'll never come back. Then they start to cry. Because if you're really an emotionally sensitive person, that's how you would respond. And we know you're a good person because you are crying over the dead bird, so you must have this highly developed sensibility. Now, of course, the rationalists and the realists thought that all the romantics were faking their emotional responses. But they weren't. A great many of them really did have intense emotional responses to things that other people had no emotional response to at all. One of the reasons why so few people have intense emotional responses to things is that we're largely an intellectual society, and we frown on emotion. Emotion is thought of as inferior to the intellect. Nobody wants to be thought inferior, so they bring their emotions under control. They stop feeling. But the romantics opened themselves completely to life. Now, a lot of them were fakes. A lot of them were pretending responses they didn't really have. There's sometimes you see a sunset and you just got to stop and watch it. But there are other times you go, yeah, sunset. There's one yesterday too. And the day before. And the day before that, come to think of it. Look pretty much the same. Seen one, you've seen them all, and you go on your way. The romantic has to respond to every sunset. They have to be moved by everything of beauty. And so obviously, no matter, you're not always moved. Some days you're just kind of numb to things. And the romantic would then, the cult of sensibility, somebody in that would have to fake an emotion. And so you had a lot of fake emotion. But you also had a lot of really legitimate emotions. People were much more open to things than we are. Refined emotion, especially pathos, pity and compassion. Now when you look at the emotions, what is the easiest emotion to conjure up in people?
Fear.
Fear. Fear is the absolute easiest. It's the easiest because it's got the most survival value. You might think anger is the easiest to conjure up, but there are some people you can't make mad. You kick them, they apologize for being in your way. But you can make everybody afraid. Even the toughest person you know, you can make afraid. And of course, fear has survival value. If sorrow were the easiest emotion to conjure up, we probably wouldn't be here. All of our cave ancestors, when the thing with big teeth came to the door, they had said, I wonder, is that herbivorous or carnivorous? And gone out to satisfy their curiosity. They would have all gotten eaten alive. They'd have never passed on their genes. We wouldn't be here. We're here because some of the people went and hid in the back of the cave and said, I don't care what it eats as long as it isn't me. And I'm hiding here till it goes away. So fear's got survival value. That's why it's easiest to conjure up. Anger is pretty easy. Now, anger is generally thought of as a negative emotion. So what a romantic writer would do would be to try to make you mad at injustice. Anger over injustice is a good thing, not a bad thing. So in other words, the emotions are all good depending on their context. Generally, though, they'll go for fear. That's why they wrote so many horror stories. So many stories of the supernatural. Because they wanted, the problem was people have lost touch with their emotions. The artist's job is to put them back in touch with them. Well, the easiest way to do that is to make them afraid. So you write a horror story. You terrify people. They can't think anymore. They have to feel, and feeling tells them what's right or wrong. You put them back in touch with their emotions. I'm not sure anger is the second easiest emotion to conjure up. Sadness may be. It's not all that hard to make people unhappy. And so that may also be another reason why the Romantics wrote so many sad poems. Joy It's a little bit harder to make people happy. Love, passion, kind of hard to stir up the passions, and that takes a little bit of work. But all of those emotions are good, and they're what the romantic writer is generally aiming at, trying to get people into an intense emotional state. And the easier it is to get you into that state, the more likely they are to go for it. Which again is why they write so much sad or at least bittersweet, lost, unrequited love. When lovers get together, you find fewer poems in which the lovers get together in romantic writing than you do poems where the lovers are somehow separated. Or they die together because that's the only way they can be together from there on. And again, it's because sorrow, the romantics liked a good cry. Neither individuals nor the meaning of life can be reduced to numbers. The world is not an understandable place. It's not a big machine. You can't judge it on the basis of the bottom line. The rationalists who preceded the romantics would have said you can judge an action by how much good it puts in the world and how much evil. We build a highway, we tear down 10 houses to do it. The people in them like those houses. They wanted to stay there. They didn't want to sell those houses. They were very unhappy to leave. The rationalist says, look, we made 1 million commuters a year this much happier. Well, 1 million times this is a big pile of happy. We made 10 people really sad. So this sad. So 10 times this is a pile of sad that big, and we created an enormous pile of happy, so was it a good thing? Yeah, we made more good in the world than sadness. The romantic says you can't look at those people whose houses were taken from them without feeling bad. What does that tell you? That it was wrong. That it was a bad thing to do. Some way should have been found to let those people keep their houses and still build the highway. The romantic says you can't do it by numbers. You can't say 1,000 people happy, 400 people sad. We did good. Ultimately, you're trying to make everybody happy. And that's what you have to aim for. If your solution has elements in it that make you feel bad, then those elements have to be changed. You have to do what makes you feel good. You have to do the right thing. And so you can't reduce the world in numbers, and you can't reduce it to logical plans. If you're going to follow your heart, can you plan what you're going to do tomorrow morning at 11? No, you got to wait until you get there and see what you feel like doing. And then you have to follow your heart. Well, let's say it's 12:30 on Tuesday, and you should be starting out for class. But it's the first really warm day of spring, and the Gulf Stream is swung in close to the coast, and the surf's up. And your heart tells you ought to surf. What would the romantic say you ought to do?
Surf.
Surf. There's a quiz today. What does the romantic tell you you should do anyway?
Stay in bed.
Go and surf. Stay in bed. Don't do what your heart tells you to do. Will you have to pay dues on that? Yeah, you missed the quiz. You might not get to take it up, and you'll lose 10 points. What does the romantic say about that? Doing the right thing has its costs. You got to pay them. Life's a struggle. Nobody said it was going to be easy being you. But the romantic would say, on the other hand, although you might end up getting a B instead of an A in the course you're taking, you'll never get that day back. This could have been the best waves ever. And you missed it because you went to class. Romantic says you never get that back. You might have been blissfully happy for 3 hours. You know how many times in your life you get to be blissfully happy for 3 hours? Almost none. Unless you take really, really heavy drugs. And then you have to pay really, really heavy dues. But in the normal course of events, people don't stay happy, really happy, for 3 hours very often. And you had a shot at it and you walked away from it. So that's probably not, that shot is not coming back. That opportunity for joy is lost. So the romantic says you got to follow your heart. Will it cost you in the long run? Sure it will. but not as much as it would cost you not to follow your heart. To the romantic, your heart will tell you what to do that's right. Are romantics practical?
No.
No. Do they end up getting the best jobs available and the highest wages?
No.
No. In fact, if you're a romantic, here's two jobs. One pays $100,000 a year, and you'll be absolutely miserable in it every moment you're there. You'll take work home with you, and it'll poison most of your life. Here's another job that only pays $15,000 a year, but you get to do whatever it is you like to do anyway, except you're going to get paid for it. Which one would a romantic take?
$15,000.
The $15,000 job, the job that's fun to do anyway. If you like to dance, the romantic says dance. Dance on the street corners. People will give you money for that. Not necessarily because they think you're a wonderful dancer, but just because just seeing somebody who's doing what they love to do, people can't resist that. And so they'll give you money to see that you can keep doing it. Will they give you lots and lots and lots of money? No. You won't make very much at it, but you'll make enough to find a place to live and to eat, and so you can dance again the next day. And you love to dance. So every day you don't dance is the day you lost for the romantics. You don't make much a year, you probably won't even pay any income tax because you don't make enough. Would a romantic say your life is successful if you live that way?
Yes.
Yeah. If you were a romantic, could you be a successful homeless person?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Maybe, and I don't think this is necessarily true, I think an awful lot of people living on the streets are because almost all of us are only about 3 paychecks from being on the street. I mean, it all collapsed tomorrow, and you didn't have a job to go to. Who's got enough money to live for 3 months? A month? So, one. So most of the rest of you are like me. Unless you can find somebody to borrow or kill and take the money off, you're pretty much out of luck today. So most of those people are out there because they have no choice. And a lot are out there because we emptied out the mental institutions, because they found wonder drugs. It cured people's mental illness as long as they take the drugs, and then we put them on the street. We gave them 3 pills and put them on the street. And their drugs ran out, and so they're there in their misery, but they don't necessarily know where they are. But there is some portion of the people who are living on the street who like that, who don't want to wear a tie under any circumstances, and who find it an adventure to move from town to town and place to place, and to not know where their next meal is coming from. Now, to most of us, that would be a horror, not knowing where we're going to sleep tonight, not knowing if we're going to eat today. But some people find that an adventure, not a big number, but the romantic would say those that do, and those that live that life by choice, are absolutely successful, are far more successful than the person driving their Mercedes into work to a job that they despise, which makes them tired just thinking about it, from their big house. To the romantic, success is doing what you want to do. And if you can get paid for that as well, then you're enormously successful, no matter how much it is that you get paid. If you can take something that you really love to do and get somebody to give you enough money to stay alive to do it with, you can't get any better than that. What would a romantic say about going to a job for the money?
It's bad.
It's bad. No matter how much they're paying you isn't enough. Because what you're selling is your life. And it's a life you won't get a second chance at. And every moment that you're miserable getting money is a moment you're not going to get back. It's a failure. It's a defeat. So to the romantic, the world is full of things to be in awe of. There's wondrous things around us all the time. The trouble is, most of us don't pay any attention to it. And the romantic thinks that you ought to get as much of that awe and as much of that wonder and as much of that joy out of the world as you possibly can. To the romantic, much of the world is beyond our comprehension. We can't understand it. Now, anybody who's a follower of Aristotle and believes in the intellect will find that an almost intolerable situation. that we can't figure out what's going on. Well, if you can't understand what's going on, how do you know what to do if you're a romantic? How do you always know what to do? You follow your heart. Doesn't matter if you know how it's coming out, as long as you know what's good and bad. You know what's good and bad because it feels good or it feels bad. That's all you have to do. You don't have to know what the big plan is. You don't have to know where you're going next or where you're going to be in 30 years. All you got to know is where you are now. And does it feel good or doesn't it feel good? And you got to respond accordingly, according to the Romantics. How many romantics do you think have a 401k?
Not many.
Yeah, none. Probably none. Because that requires thinking about the future and sacrificing the moment for a moment that may never come. You realize you put all your money away for retirement, you might die of a heart attack before you get to retire? What a bummer that would be. Think of all the fun you could have had with that money. What does the Romantics say to do?
Let's use it.
Use it. Live now. This is the one moment you're sure of getting. The moment that you're in. And the Romantic says that's the moment you got to live for. Maybe you're going to have it. You don't save anything in retirement. You spend. You have a good time now. You're going to have a miserable old age. What would the Romantic say about that?
Fine.
It's fine. It's a struggle. Live now. When you get to be old, find something to be joyful about being old. Generally, it's young romantics, I believe, who propose that. There isn't a lot good about being old. Nothing leaps to mind, as a matter of fact. So you're going to be miserable when you're old anyway, so you might as well have as good a time now as you can. When are you in the best condition for having fun? For most of you, right now. You don't get better at it as you get older. Generally, you get worse. You get more tired, your senses run down, you develop a sense of dignity. There's all kind of ways that you can make a fool of yourself now that later on in life you won't be able to do. So the Romantic says now's the time to be alive. That's why they write so many poems about youth. Because youth is when you have the greatest opportunity. And it's like George Bernard Shaw said, the problem with youth is that it's wasted on the young. Most of the time when you're young, you're looking at what you're going to be somewhere down the line. In fact, you probably wouldn't be here if you weren't doing that. Most people are at Brookdale to get a better job. When? Tomorrow? No, 2 years from now, 4 years from now. You're living on days that haven't even happened yet. The Romantic would say, have a good time now. Worry about later. Again, they don't plan ahead. They don't. And so, do the Romantics always live happily ever after?
No.
No. A true Romantic, though, would be happy being miserable. In other words, they would say, look, this is the life I created for myself. To jump ahead a little bit, you notice that the signalman, he hasn't got a real good job. It's kind of boring. It's a very responsible job. It's an important job, but it's not real challenging. He said he had his chances in life. He could have been something more important, something better, but he passed those up. He had a good time when he was young and he didn't apply himself. And so he ended up being a signalman. Is he unhappy about that?
No.
No, he accepts that. He said, look, this is the life I made for myself. I made this. May not be what other people think is a good life, but I'm satisfied that if this is what I have to do now to pay off the fun I had then, I accept that. Romantics aren't really necessarily expecting things to be good all the time. In fact, they expect life to be a struggle. Sometimes it'll be joy, sometimes it'll be sorrow. You want to immerse yourself, though, in life, because that's all you have. The moment is what you have. Enjoy your happiness and enjoy your misery as well, because your misery is a challenge. The individual is the ultimate authority because all important questions are moral in nature. In other words, It all has to do with what's good and bad, with what's right and wrong. And since you have to follow your heart to do that, you're the ultimate judge. Not tradition, not your culture, not any other form of authority. You're the absolute final arbiter of what right and wrong is, and you've got to follow your own heart. Therefore, humanity has to be free from all systems. The state, and you'll see this particularly with the European Romantics, is almost always seen as the enemy. Government is always the enemy, not because it's spying on you, not because it's trying to imprison you for your ideas, but because it keeps you from being you. Every time the state makes a law, it limits your individual choice. It tells you what you can do and what you can't do. Well, the Romantic says that you can't listen to that. The state is always going to try to make you into a generic person. The good citizen. The person who follows all the rules. But the rules aren't made for you. It goes back to that driving 55 again. Some people can drive safely at 110. Some people can't drive safely at 30. You've probably been behind them on your way up here. The law isn't right for every individual. No law can be. And since individuality is what matters, the individual almost always has to oppose the state. The state and society in general is almost always the enemy of the artist. Because the artist is acting in terms of his vision of the world, his way of seeing things, his sense of the good. And usually if you're an artist, you're breaking new ground. That's what gives you the definition of being an artist. In other words, it's going to be what somebody never did before. How do people usually respond to stuff nobody ever did before? They're usually happy with it. Does it make them comfortable? Not usually. Most people are upset if everybody doesn't do what they expect them to do. And so, as an artist, you're going to offend a lot of people because you're doing new things. And society will try to make you stop doing them, and your friends will try to make you stop doing them, in general. But the Romantic says you are the individual. You've got to follow that. You've got to resist society. You've got to resist the law. And you've got to resist the state. You've got to resist culture. You've got to try to be yourself above all else. If everybody were themselves, what would happen to stability and organization and civilization as a whole?
Break down.
It would generally break down. Would the Romantics consider that a bad thing?
No.
No. They don't need order. All they need is everybody following their heart. Now, ultimately, if you said to the Romantic, if everybody starts obeying their own laws, and everybody is a law unto themselves, we'll have chaos. The Romantic would say yes, but it won't be a violent chaos. Because everybody will be doing the right thing. You don't have to worry about serial killers running amok if we get rid of the police, because if everybody followed their heart, there wouldn't be any serial killers. How could you murder somebody if you could feel what you were doing? If your intellect wasn't somehow in the way of that? So there wouldn't be any, to the Romantics, there wouldn't be any crime if everybody followed their heart. The problem, of course, is, well, what is the problem with that theory of the world?
You never know.
You never know when people are going to follow their heart or what their heart's like, what they think their heart's like. I mean, what would happen if you had a serial killer who felt perfectly good harming other people? Ultimately, a Romantic would have to say, hey, he's being himself. That's what he is. If you're born a serial killer, be a good serial killer. Enjoy every moment of it. But the Romantic believes that that couldn't happen. That you couldn't harm other people if you were really open to your emotions. Remember, good feels good. There is a good that is driving the world, and it doesn't drive us to harm one another. So if we were all following our heart, people wouldn't do stuff like that. That's why we don't need systems. That's why we don't need the state. That's why we don't need civilization, as far as the Romantic is concerned. All we need is everybody doing the right thing, which they would do, the Romantic things, if they followed their hearts. That's why conscience is the only law. If everybody did their version of the good, it would all turn out fine, according to the Romantics. Other people are skeptical. They're self-consciously spiritual. They're not materialistic. Stuff is not important. Feelings are important. People are important. Generally, to get stuff, you've got to sacrifice people. Say your friends. Your friends like to see you, but you really want a new CD. So you have to work. And your boss doesn't like your friends dropping in. So you've got to deprive them and have an hour of your company in order to get this thing. And in most cases, where we get things, we have to give up time to get them. Most stuff doesn't come easy. Most material goods has to be paid for with some kind of effort and some kind of sacrifice. And at the very minimum, it takes up your time. And so we sacrifice to the Romantics. Stuff is bad. It's not good to have stuff. Stuff corrupts you. When you get stuff, all it makes you do is want more stuff. If I didn't have a computer that I had to buy writable CD-ROMs for, I might not be here. I might be somewhere else doing something I like to do. So would you. Why are you, if you're here to get a job, as most people in most classes seem to say they are here to do, to get a better job. Why do you want a better job? Why do you want a higher paying job? What are you going to do with that money?
Buy stuff.
Buy stuff. If you didn't want that stuff, you wouldn't have to be here suffering at the moment. You could be out on a relatively cold, but nevertheless nice spring day taking a walk in the woods, or whatever it is you like to do. Stuff got you into this mess. So the Romantics don't like stuff. In fact, if you have stuff as a Romantic, what should you do with it?
Get rid of it.
You should get rid of it. You should share it. That's what they teach you to do when you're a little kid. Share stuff. Wherever you see people who don't have something, you should give them yours. If you've got a lot of stuff, it means this is why they're self-consciously spiritual and why they're anti-materialistic. If you've got stuff piling up, it means you're not giving it away fast enough. The greedy part of you is taken over. The greedy part is the intellect. It's the intellect that says to you, don't give this away today because you might need it a year from now or 5 years from now. Keep it useless in the basement until then.
Except for a computer.
Even that, the Romantic would say you should take your computer and give it to the library. So lots of people can use it when you're not using it. You'd make a lot more people happy. Plus, you wouldn't have to buy discs. They would give you discs to use. Although really, you probably shouldn't save anything on disk anyway because it's only the moment that matters anyhow. And probably the Romantics wouldn't be real big on the computer unless you're in a chat room where you were answering a personal ad of some kind. You were establishing a relationship over the internet and then went to meet people as a result of it. The Romantics probably think a computer was a good thing. But in itself, no object is good. All stuff is useless in itself. And so therefore they want to be spiritual. The more attention you pay to things, the less attention you're paying to the good. And generally the more things you're getting, the more bad things you do to get them. Not real bad things. I mean, you're not beating people up and stealing their wallets. But most business is a kind of theft. The number of businesses that really give you a value equal to what they charge you is almost nil. I mean, it's a capitalist society. Profit. You don't make a thing for $20 and sell it for $20. You sell it for $40. So that $20 is that you charge people with stuff it really wasn't worth. That's stuff that you got. You really maybe should have charged them $21. Do you know any place that tries to make as small a profit as possible? No, all business in America and everywhere in the world tries to make as big a profit as possible. So as far as the Romantic is concerned, is it a good thing to cheat people? No. Well, if you charge people $40 for something that's worth $20, you're cheating them. At least out of 15 of it, probably out of 20 of that 40. So in other words, to get stuff, you have to do stuff which is bad. The romantic would say, you're getting a lot of stuff, you must be doing a lot of bad stuff. Maybe not real bad stuff like murder, but still bad stuff like cheating people. Still bad stuff like not giving people what they deserve. There are probably some lies involved in what you do. Well, what if they're not the lies you tell? You work for a company that sells stuff, and it has commercials. Are commercials true?
No.
No. So it lies. What would the romantic say about working for a company that lies?
It's bad.
It's bad. If it's bad when you lie, if you let somebody else lie, and you pretend you don't know that's a lie, you're part of the lie yourself. So now, how many jobs do the romantics tend to get? A true romantic probably wouldn't have any. Who could they work for? Who is there in a capitalist society that doesn't lie and doesn't cheat by romantic standards? Almost none. So you can see why they're not materialistic. Well, what would they say if say, look, you can't get a job, you can't hold a job because you have these real high ethics that don't let you work for anybody who lies, and you don't have any stuff and you're sleeping on the street? What would the romantics say?
It's fine.
That's fine. I'm a hero. I had a choice. I could have done a bad thing and got a bed for the night. Or I could have done the right thing and sleep on the sidewalk. I'm sleeping on the sidewalk. It takes a hero to do that. Other people sell out. They see their moment for heroism and they let it go by. But I didn't. I feel good about myself sleeping out here. Am I cold? Yes. Is it hard to sleep here? Yeah. Do I get a good night's sleep? No. But I get a better night's sleep with a clear conscience than I would in the most luxurious bed with a conscience that's keeping me up all night. Of course, the rationalist says, well, there's your problem. Get rid of your conscience. Why do you care? Everybody lies and cheats and steals. That makes it a way of people. That makes it human nature. So you ought to do it. Everybody else does it. Why feel bad about it? They're idealistic. They look for perfection. They try to act in terms of that perfection. They try to do what's right. They're impractical. They don't plan things very well because they got to follow their heart. They don't make practical choices. They do what's right, and doing what's right usually isn't expedient. It's not usually the thing that's the most practical. They're uncompromising, like those knights out of the Middle Ages. They have to do what's right, and they can't compromise on that. And they're generally passionately committed because all of their actions derive from their emotions. Now, when it comes down to their art, one of the first things that they would hold, all romantic artists, whether they're writing prose or poetry, would argue that, first of all, art should inspire. It should stir up people's emotions. The artist should create an intense emotional state, sometimes to reawaken the deadened emotional state that people have gotten themselves into by following the intellect, and sometimes just because emotional states are good in themselves. The emotions are good. It's good to feel things for the romantic. It's bad not to feel things. It's better to be miserable than numb, as far as the romantic is concerned. So when they write their poetry, and when they write their prose, they want to stir up people's emotions. They want to inspire people in two senses. One, they want to encourage them to do the right thing. They want to make them see the right thing clearer and to act in terms of it. And they also want to make them feel good. Generally, romantic writing, what kind of endings do you usually have with romantic writing? Happy ending. Good triumphs over evil. Love triumphs over death. Everybody lives happily ever after. Everybody does what's right, and everybody feels good about it. So generally, the romantic writer is out to make his reader feel better. Sometimes they want to make him feel sad. Sometimes they want to make him feel angry. But the ultimate end of that is so that they feel good in the long run. They're trying to make the world a better place. This is a kind of almost contradictory concept, and that's the concept of the sublime, which you note is characterized by nobility and grandeur, exalted, spiritual, raised above ordinary human qualities. Now sometimes the sublime is not necessarily nice. It's just intense. The sublime is when the ordinary world suddenly takes on a significance beyond itself. In other words, when you suddenly perceive ordinary events as part of the good or as part of the world. They're very intense experiences. They may not necessarily be intensely pleasant, but they are intense. Remember, all emotion is good to the romantic. So the romantic loves thunderstorms. They even like being out in them. They're wet, they're cold, they're afraid, they're uncomfortable. And how do they feel about that?
Feel good.
They feel good, they love it. They're having a good time being, when a romantic is afraid, they're having a good time being afraid. They like, especially things in nature, like wild places that are hard to get to. First of all, because they're natural. The more artificial a thing is, the more man-made it is, the more the intellect is involved. Does a romantic see the intellect as good or evil? Evil, it's the intellect that corrupts your feeling. It keeps you from feeling and following your heart. So the more artificial a thing is, generally the more a romantic doesn't like it. So they would like those woods a lot better than this building. Of course, most people would like those woods a lot better than this building. I mean, this building is just, this is some siding salesman's fantasy. What is it, 12 million square feet of siding. This is not a beautiful building by a long shot. And to the romantic, very few buildings are beautiful. What they like is ruins. They love ruins. Because ruins have a feeling of decay and things passed away, and you think of how the people used to live there and what their lives were like and what they loved and what they lost. And so there are all these emotions associated with old stuff, especially old stuff that's fallen apart. Anything that's unusual they like, even if it's grotesque. Even if it's not necessarily beautiful, it could still be sublime. The ugly can be sublime because it sets the moment apart. When you see this thing that is so ugly that it becomes a landmark in your life, and this is the ugliest thing you've ever seen, that's the sublime. You're touching now something that goes beyond the mundane world. Problem is, everybody gets lost in the mundane world. They get lost in the routine. They don't see what's going on around them. They don't feel what's going on around them. And then you come to this really ugly thing. And after that, everything looks a little more beautiful to you. That's why it was allowing you to touch the sublime. So the sublime, the thing that they went after, is what they called sweet pain. It makes you feel bad, but it also makes you feel good that you're feeling bad. It makes you reevaluate the world. It wakes you up. Anything that wakes you up. Now, obviously, a romantic would probably rather see a really, really beautiful thing than a really, really, really ugly thing. But it's better to see an ugly thing and be repulsed than it is to have no feeling at all. And so coming across the sublime stirs up your life. They like lofty thoughts and noble feelings. All of the stuff which is politically correct is romantic. Why do you have to be politically correct? What's the basis for it? Why can't you say things that offend other people? Why should you care about what other people think? No, there's no guarantee in the Constitution that you won't be offended by life. Life is pretty offensive. Almost everybody can find somebody who offends them, even though they're not trying to. Because the romantic at bottom doesn't want to hurt anybody's feelings. If you say something that makes somebody feel bad to the romantic, you've hurt them. That's a bad thing to do. You wouldn't want it to be done to you, so you can't do it to anybody else. So the idea that you have to not hurt people's feelings, that's romantic. And the whole idea of being politically correct is based on that same idea, that you don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, because that's a bad thing to do. Those are lofty thoughts. Probably in our private life, all of us say offensive things that somebody would find offensive if they could hear us all of the time. We don't admit to those things. We try to deny them even to ourselves because we try to think of lofty things. We try to think of the noble thing to do, the right thing to do. Whenever we fall short of the right thing, we feel bad about it. And one way to get around feeling bad about it is to lie to yourself and say you didn't do it. So the romantics are always trying to think lofty thoughts and have noble feelings. Well, the problem there is we're not noble all the time. Some of us have bad thoughts a lot of the time about other people. And the romantic says, well, then you ought to feel bad about that. And instead, you ought to spend your time thinking of the right things, the good things. In their work, you'll find lots of adjectives of sensation. Lots of description, whether it's poetry or it's prose. The one thing you can be sure of is having a lot of descriptive adjectives. When you use a descriptive adjective, it appeals to one of the senses. If you say crimson, people have to think of a color. It involves the senses. Sensation goes up, what happens to the emotions?
Goes down.
Sensation goes up, not the intellect. The emotion goes up. So you can see why they put so much, the more sensation they put into their writing, the more they increase people's sensations, and that's a good thing. Emphasis on personal experience and emotion, because you are the center of the universe. You're the only one like you there's ever been. The emotional associations of a thing. Art is important not for what it makes you think, but for what it makes you feel. And the last thing I want to point out to you is the romantic dichotomy. This is the problem the romantics have. Spontaneous and natural are good. The problem with that is that most writing improves if you revise it and you work on it. But when you revise it and work on it, what are you applying? The emotions or the intellect? The intellect. The emotions that generated that piece of art have cooled considerably. So in other words, you're acting in a less remote emotional state, which is a less good state. You're using the intellect, which is a bad thing. So when you revise, your work shouldn't be as good as spontaneous work is. The problem is, most of the stuff that you write improves with revision. And the Romantics didn't know what to do about that because it seemed to prove them wrong. When I revise, it comes out better, but it shouldn't come out better. It should come out spontaneously good. Whenever I work on it, I should be making it worse, but up to a point, I make it better. So that's the romantic dichotomy, and that's why they wrote so much bad stuff. They wrote a lot of bad stuff. They wrote a lot of great stuff, but they wrote a lot of bad stuff because they didn't revise. And they were loath to change anything once they had done it. And they tried to keep it as close to the emotions as they could, and a lot of times you have to be a good artist, you got to manipulate your reading. Next week we'll apply this to romantic poetry and romantic prose. So make sure you've read and we will have the quiz next week. We've got an appointment in Samara.